Hello everyone, welcome back to our AWS tutorial series. So in previous video, we learned about AWS Global Infrastructure and AWS IAM. Today we are going to learn about one of the most AWS services, Amazon EC2. EC2 stands for Elastic Compute Cloud and it allows us to run the virtual server in the AWS cloud. By the end of this video, we will understand EC2 instance, AMIs, instance types, key pairs, security groups, and storage, IP address, and EC2 lifecycle. Amazon EC2 stands for Elastic Compute Cloud. EC2 is an AWS service that provides resizable compute capacity in the cloud. In simple terms, we can think of a EC2 instance as a virtual computer running inside the AWS. We can choose its operating system, CPU, memory, storage, networking, and security configuration according to our requirements. Let us compare a traditional physical server with EC2. The traditional server, an organization may need to purchase hardware, install it in the data center, configure it, and maintain it. With EC2, we can provision a virtual server through AWS. We can increase or decrease the capacity as our application requirement change. Why do companies use EC2? One of the major advantages is flexibility. We can choose different CPU and memory configuration. We can launch the servers when we need it and terminate them when they are no longer required. EC2 also integrates with the services such as S3, IAM, VPC, CloudWatch, and Elastic Load Balancing. EC2 can be used for many different workloads. So for example, we can host a web application, REST API, backend services, or a Java Spring Boot application. We can also use EC2 for development, testing, and batch processing workloads. For managed database workloads, however, AWS also provides services such as Amazon RDS, which we will discuss separately. Now coming to the EC2 instance, an EC2 instance is a virtual server running on AWS infrastructure. When we launch an EC2 instance, we are selecting the combination of the computing resources such as CPU, memory, storage, and networking. The instance then run our selected operating system and application. So let us see the EC2 instance architecture. When we launch an EC2 instance, several important components come together. The AMI determines the operating system and initial software configuration. The instance type determines the computer resources. The key pair is used for authentication. The security group controls network traffic, and storage provides the disk's capacity. Now let us see what is AMI. AMI stands for Amazon Machine Image, and AMI provides the information required to launch EC2 instance. It can include an operating system and a software configuration. For example, we can choose Amazon Linux AMI or an Ubuntu AMI when launching our server. Let us see instance types. The instance type determines the computing resource available for our EC2 instance. AWS provides different instance families designed for different workloads. General purpose instance provide a balanced combination of CPU and memory. Compute optimized instances are designed for CPU intensive workloads. Memory optimized instance provide a more memory for memory intensive application. Now let us see the example for the instance naming. You will often see EC2 instance names such as T3.micro. The name contains information about the instance family and size. The important thing for beginners is to understand the different size provides different amounts of resource and have different pricing. Now let us see what is keep fair. When we connecting to the secure Linux EC2 instance, we commonly use a key pair. The public key is associated with the instance while we securely retain the private key. The private key is used to authenticate our SSH connection. We should never share or expose the private key. And coming to the security group acts as a virtual firewall for our EC2 instance. It controls network traffic to and from the instance. For example, SSH commonly uses the port 22, HTTP uses port 80, and HTTPS uses port 443. For security, we should allow only the traffic that our application actually requires. Now let us see what is public and private IP. An EC2 instance can have private networking and depending on its configuration, a public IPv4 address. The private IP is used for communication within the VPC. A public IP can be used for communicating from the internet when the network configuration and security rules allows it. For simple SSH level, we commonly connect using instance public IPv4 address. Now let us see what is EC2 storage. EC2 instance can use Amazon EBS for persistent block storage. EBS volume can store the operating system and application files, logs, and other data. We will cover EBS in more details in the separate video. EC2 is not simply about the cost of the virtual machine. The overall cost can depend on the instance type, region, operating system, storage, data transfer, and other resources. This is why we should always check current AWS pricing before running resources for an extended period. Let us see EC2 life cycle. An EC2 instance has different life cycle states. When we launch an instance, it goes through the pending state and then become running. We can stop an instance and the later it start again, depending on the storage and configuration. We can also terminate an instance when we no longer need it. What is the difference between the stop and terminate? When we stop an instance, we can generally start it again. When we terminate it, we will permanently deleting the instance. Therefore, we need to be careful when selecting the terminate. EC2 is rarely used completely by itself in a production architecture. An application might run on EC2 while using S3 for object storage, RDS for managed relationship database, and elastic load balancing to distribute traffic. IAM controls permission, and CloudWatch can be used for monitoring. Now, let us see the real world Java application. Suppose we have a Spring Boot REST API, we can deploy the application on an EC2 Linux instance. Users can access the application through the appropriate network configuration and the application can communicate with the other AWS services. So let us see how to launch the EC2 instance. We start from the EC2 console, select the launch instance, then we choose the AMI and instance type. We configure the key pair, networking security group, and the storage. Finally, we launch the instance. These are some of the common EC2 interview questions. Make sure you understand the concept rather than simply memorizing the definition. Especially focus on AMI, instance type, security groups, key pair, EPS, and the difference between the stopping and terminating an instance. Let us quickly summarize. EC2 provides compute capacity and AMI provides the information needed to launch the instance. An instance type determines the compute resources. The key pair is used for authentication. The security group controls networking traffic. And EBS provides the persistent block storage. Once you understand these components, you have a strong foundation for working with the EC2. If you found this video helpful, please like, share, and subscribe. In next video, we'll learn about next topic. Thank you for watching.